Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
Aloe vera සාරය සමග ඔබේ අත්යට දහදිය දුගඳ පාලනය කරයි. දවස පුරා fresh බව රඳවයි.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Monday, the 19th of December 2022. Encouraging remittances. New mechanism to allow migrant workers to obtain housing loans at lower interest rates. Tax reforms. Speaker of Parliament endorses certificate on the Inland Revenue Amendment Bill, making it effective from today.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. With Suzanne Shinelli. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're joining us on First at 9, bringing you the latest locally and internationally. As part of ongoing investigations into the murder of Dinesh Shafter under mysterious circumstances, authorities have uncovered several new leads. As part of the investigation, footage from 8 CCTV cameras were inspected today.
Following the murder of Janashakti PLC director Dinesh Shafter under mysterious circumstances on the 15th of December, the Homicide and Organised Crimes Division of the Criminal Investigations Department has launched an investigation in collaboration with the Buralla Police. After examining footage from several CCTV cameras and recording statements, police have uncovered new details pertaining to the incident. Footage from 8 CCTV cameras were inspected by the authorities today, and it has been established that Shafter travelled alone to the Buralla cemetery from his residence. Authorities have further informed that the mobile phones of Dinesh Shafter and Brian Thomas have been handed over for forensic reports. While the inspection of the mobile phone of Dinesh Shafter has already begun, it is reported that the examination will take time due to the large volume of data stored. However, the Criminal Investigation Department mentioned that the examination of the mobile phone of Brian Thomas has still not begun.
A passenger ferry service is expected to commence between India and Sri Lanka from next month. As both countries agreed to commence services, Minister of Ports and Shipping Nimal Siripala De Silva said around 3 companies have expressed interest to operate the service.
A passenger ferry service connecting the Kankasanture port in Jaffna district and Pondicherry in Tamil Nadu is expected to commence next month in a bid to boost tourism. Minister of Ports and Shipping Nimal Siripala De Silva said the Indian government had granted consent to set up the service. He also said around 3 companies have expressed interest to operate a ferry service, and they've been informed to obtain Indian approval to operate in Indian waters. The vessels under the new service will carry 300 to 400 passengers on one trip that would take about 3.5 hours. This service is also expected to strengthen cultural ties between the two countries and improve connectivity. Meanwhile, Ports and Shipping Minister has instructed officials to develop infrastructure related to customs, immigration and emigration and other facilities at the Sri Lankan ports.
Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment Manusha Nanaikara says a new mechanism will be implemented allowing migrant workers to obtain housing loans at lower interest rates. Addressing the International Migrants Day celebration at the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment, he said discussion with the central bank and other banks with this regard have been completed.
විදේශගත ශ්‍රමිකයා එවන ලද මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයට සාපේක්ෂව ඒ අයට ලංකාවට එනකොට ඩියුටි ෆ්‍රී ඇලවන්ස් එකක් දෙන්න අපි ප්‍රතිපත්ති සම්පාදකයෝ විදියට කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ අනුමැතිය ලබා දීලා මාස 4ක් විතර වෙනවා. තාම මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයත් මහ බැංකුවත් ඒ වෙනුවෙන් ගත යුතු ක්‍රියාමාර්ග අරගෙන නැහැ. හැබැයි නිලධාරීන් ඒවත් උඩ තියාගෙන වාඩි වෙලා ඉන්නව නම් ඒවට විරුද්ධව කතා කරන්න, ඒවට විරුද්ධව අපිට පුළුවන් දේ කරන්න. නොපැකිලව වැඩ කරනවා. නිවාස ණය ලබා ගැනීම සඳහාත් අලුත් වැඩපිළිවෙලක් තව දින කිහිපයක් ඇතුළත අපිට පුළුවන් වෙයි අලුත් අවුරුද්ද අවුරුද්දේ පටන් ගන්න බැංකු සියල්ල සහ මහ බැංකුවේ සඳහා ඕනි කරන මූලික කටයුතු සකස් කරලා ඉවරයි. ඒ කියන්නේ රටේ සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සුන්ට ගන්න තියෙන පොලියට වඩා අඩු පොලියකට විදේශගත ශ්‍රමිකයාට ණය ගන්න පුළුවන් ගෙවල් හදන්න හැමෝගෙම අවධානය යොමු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මම දැක්කා කෝප් කමිටුවේ අවධානය යොමු වෙලා තියෙනවා අපිට බිලියන ගාණක සංචිතයක් අපිට තියෙනවා කියලා. මේ සංචිත තියාගෙන ඉඳලා බහභාණ්ඩාගාරයට ඕන වෙලාවට අරගෙන ඒ වලින් අර සුදු අලි නඩත්තු කරන සමහර වෙලාවට ගන්නවා. විදේශගත ශ්‍රමිකයා වෙනුවෙන් ඒ අයගේ සුබ සාධනය වෙනුවෙන් පනතේ අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙන බලය අනුව අපිට මුදල් වියදම් කරන්න පුළුවන්.
Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa today endorsed the certificate on the Inland Revenue Amendment Bill, which was recently passed by a majority of votes after debate in Parliament. Following the debate on the second reading of the bill held on the 9th of December, a division was called by the opposition. Accordingly, 83 votes were cast in favour of the bill and 41 votes against. Subsequently, a division was called for the third reading of the Inland Revenue Amendment Bill by the opposition, to which 79 votes were cast in favour of the bill and 36 votes against. Accordingly, the Communications Department of Parliament stated that this bill comes into force as Inland Revenue Amendment Act number 45 of 2022 from today. The Cabinet of Ministers has decided to discuss with all Mahanayaka Theras to come to an agreement on the academic and administrative affairs of the Buddhist and Pali University of Sri Lanka. According to the President's Media Division, the Cabinet has also decided to close the university until then. Earlier, a discussion was also made to close the university until further notice from today due to reports of serious incidents of ragging and indiscipline amongst a section of the students. China's relaxation of COVID-19 curbs and the US decision to buy back oil from its strategic petroleum reserves gave rise to oil prices today. More news on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
It's hard to keep up with the new when you're listening to the same old Slim Brand Week. A week for professionals.
Welcome back. The Committee on High Posts, chaired by Speaker of Parliament, approved the appointments of 4 ambassadors and 2 permanent representatives. The envoys were appointed to France, Germany, Jordan and Vietnam, while permanent representatives to UNESCO and the UN were also named.
Parliament's Committee on High Posts approved the appointment of Manisha Gunasekara as the ambassador of Sri Lanka to the French Republic and the permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization in Paris. The appointment of Himali Subhashini de Silva Arunatilaka as the permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva in Switzerland was also approved by the Parliamentary Committee. In addition, the appointments of Lanka Varunimutukumarana as the ambassador of Sri Lanka to Germany, Priyangika Vijayagunasekara as the Sri Lankan ambassador to the Kingdom of Jordan, and Sanjeev Umayanga Mendis as the ambassador to Vietnam was also approved.
On some hopeful news, China is donating 5 billion rupees worth of school uniform material to Sri Lanka students to meet 70% of the country's requirement in 2023. According to the Chinese embassy in Colombo, the first batch of finished material of 3 million meters in 38,000 boxes have been dispatched from China in 20 containers. The Chinese embassy tweeted that the first batch of school uniform donation, including 2.3 million meters of white shirt and frock material, 350,000 meters of white trouser material, 150,000 meters of blue trouser material, and 138,000 meters of orange robe materials. Colombo stock's main index closed in red as a result of price losses in countries such as Balibar 1, Lanka IOC and Brown's Investments, with turnover crossing 2.5 billion rupees. The index was down 1.3% at 8,626.21. Meanwhile, similar behavior was witnessed in the S&P SL20, which slid 1.65% to 2,749.54. High net worth and institutional investor participation was noted in Expo Lanka Holdings, CIC Holdings and John Keel's Holdings. Mixed interest was observed in Sri Lanka IOC, Richard Peris and Company, to First Capital Holdings, while retail interest was noted in Brown's Investment, Softlogic Capital and LOLC refinance. Furthermore, foreigners remained active, closing as net buyers. Transportation sector was the top contributor to market turnover as the sector index lost 0.24%. The share price of Expo Lanka Holdings decreased 0.24% to close at 206 rupees and 75 cents. Energy sector was the second highest contributor to market turnover, with the sector index decreasing 5%. The share price of Lanka IOC lost 5.18% to close at 219 rupees and 50 cents. Now let's take a look at how the rupee has fared against the major currencies in the world. The yen climbed on news that the Japanese government could soon revise a joint statement with the Bank of Japan over its inflation target, potentially paving the way for a tweak in the Bank of Japan's ultra-loose monetary policy. Meanwhile, currencies around the world made moves amid key central bank decisions last week.
The yen was last 0.4% stronger at 136.19 per dollar after jumping more than 0.5% to a high of 135.78 earlier in the session. The Japanese government will consider revising next year a joint statement it signed with the Bank of Japan in 2013 that commits the central bank to meeting a 2% inflation target as soon as possible. The revision, if made, would be done after a new governor is appointed in April, a move that may heighten the chance of a tweak in Japan's ultra-loose monetary policy, which caused the yen to plunge more than 15% this year. Elsewhere today, the dollar edged lower, with the sterling 0.28% higher at $1.21 after falling 1% last week, as investors bet the Bank of England might be getting close to the end of a rate hike cycle. The euro gained 0.19% to $1.06, while the Australian dollar rose 0.24% to 67 cents, while the New Zealand dollar fell 0.11% to 63 cents. The US dollar index slipped 0.19% to 104.61. A slew of central bank meetings last week saw the Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank each raising rates by 50 basis points, with the Fed and the ECB delivering hawkish comments and pledging more rate hikes ahead, even with the risk of hurting growth. Meanwhile, the Chinese offshore yuan was last marginally lower at 6.9858 per dollar.
Despite the Chinese government's resolve to stabilize the economy in 2023 with synchronized monetary and fiscal policies, the Greater Chinese stocks traded lower today, anticipating tougher times ahead. Meanwhile, according to industry sources, wealthy Chinese individuals are paring holdings of local securities and are increasingly looking at assets in the United States and elsewhere overseas, a trend that is set to gather pace in 2023.
Asia-Pacific markets traded lower today, with Greater Chinese markets leading losses in the region despite the government's pledges to stabilize the economy in 2023. The Shanghai Composite fell 1.92% to 3,107.12 as the city announced it will shut more schools again today as the number of COVID cases surged. The Shenzhen Component fell 1.5% to 11,124.7, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell 0.75% in its final hour of trade. Following public statements on the plans to stabilize markets with ample liquidity, the People's Bank of China is slated to set rates for its 1- and 5-year loan prime rates tomorrow. Hit hard by losses this year, rich Chinese have become more concerned by the uncertain outlook for a domestic economy grappling with COVID disruptions, as well as the geopolitical implication of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on China. Underlining the bleak return prospects at home, hedge funds with Greater China strategies have lost 12.9% for the year to end November, on track for their worst since 2011. The S&P ASX 200 in Australia traded 0.21% lower to 7,133.9. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 fell 1.05% to 27,237.64, and the Topix lost 0.76% to 1,935.4. South Korea's Kospi was down 0.33% at 2,352.17.
Oil rose today as the prospect of demand recovery led by China's loosening of COVID-19 curbs and the United States' decision to buy back oil for its strategic petroleum reserves gained the upper hand over global recession fears. Oil prices fell recently over comments made by central banks over further interest rate hikes next year, as many economies worldwide are predicting to slide into recession.
Brent crude futures gained 0.5% to $79.46 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $74.67, up 0.5%. Both benchmarks plunged more than $2 a barrel last Friday following hawkish remarks from U.S. and European central banks on interest rate hikes that have sparked worries of possible recession. China, the world's top crude importer and second largest oil consumer, is experiencing its first of 3 expected waves of COVID-19 cases after Beijing relaxed mobility restrictions. China's abrupt end to its dynamic zero-COVID policy is breathing new life into the ailing aviation sector, with average jet fuel demand jumping by 75% or nearly 170,000 barrels per day in 2 weeks. According to reports, China plans to increase flights with a goal to restore the country's average daily passenger flight volumes to 70% of 2019 levels by the 6th of January. An announcement by the U.S. Energy Department on Friday that it will begin repurchasing crude oil for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for delivery in February next year also supported the outlook for stronger prices. This will be the United States' first purchase since this year's record 180 million barrel release from the stockpile.
And that concludes tonight's broadcast on First at 9. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Coming up next is Anuradha Vikramasinghe with World News Tonight. Stay safe and have a good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.